All right, when we return after the break, we're going to have another special interview. This one with NFBC veteran James Roday Rodriguez, the star of USA Network's series Psych. Let's see what the psychic has in store for us next on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. Welcome back to the Stats Fantasy Advantage. Greg Ambrosius of the National Fantasy Baseball Championship here. I'm trying to keep up on everything. 15 baseball games, basketball games, hockey playoffs. Whew, it's a bit much for one guy. Royals suffered their first loss of the season. They're now 7-1. They lost to the mighty Twins 3-1. Royals offense finally shackled by none other than Kyle Gibson, who gets the win. He's 1-on-1, 9 hits in 6 innings, so Kyle Gibson gets the win. Royals held to 1 run. Brewers also losing. Brewers are terrible this year, I hope you know. Brewers losing to the Cardinals 4-2 in St. Louis. All right. We are giving away over $3 million in the National Fantasy Baseball Championship. And to win at fantasy sports, you almost need to be a psychic. You have to see the future. You have to predict the future. You have to know what's going to happen. So with all that in mind, we bring in one of the best fantasy baseball players in the industry, James Roday, the star of USA Network Psych. James, thanks for joining us tonight and welcome to the show.
It is an honor and a privilege. You are the Sam Elliott of fantasy sports.
I take that as a compliment for sure.
You've been rocking the mustache since I met you. You have not wavered, and I respect that.
If you had met me in 1978, you would have still seen the same mustache, James. So I don't change very much. So thank you very much. Hey, I got to introduce you to our producer, Drew Phelps. He is a huge Psych fan, and he's getting married this weekend as well. Drew, say hi to James.
Hi, James. We spoke off air, and yes, he already, I don't even know what to say.
This is somewhat anticlimactic, Greg. His marriage is actually not going to happen. He and I are actually eloping next Saturday, and we're hoping that you can join us on the trip. We're going to Zihuatanejo.
I am free next Saturday, so I will join you for sure. But I'll tell you what, if he stalks you like some of those fans at Comic-Con, just let me know. I'll have security remove him from the show, all right?
Yeah, I apologize to Drew's wife, but when you know, you know.
Yeah, you can feel it.
It's just it's that moment we had off there. It was there.
Yeah.
It was rich and it was pure.
I have to ask James here because I thought you were the best fantasy player because you were a psychic. But from talking with Drew, he says you really played a detective who faked that he was a psychic. Is that correct?
It's true. I made my so-called career off complete buffoonery, Greg. There was nothing legitimate about my skill set, except that I could talk a good game, which is kind of what my approach to fantasy sports in the NFBC has been.
Absolutely.
I show up like I don't have a care in the world, like I've got everything figured out. I make some jokes. And the reality is, I'm sure you know, as a true expert, is that I have the least amount of knowledge of anyone in the room.
Well, let's call up your resume. In 2009, you did win an NFBC main event league title, and you finished 7th overall out of 435 teams. That was the year that Lindy Hinkleman won his first overall title. So, come on, let's give yourself a little hope here. Let me ask you, did that give you false hope that you really felt like you were a good fantasy player? That's why you keep coming back?
I'm so glad you brought that up because you couldn't have nailed it more. Like, yes, it was a great moment for me because it came early and it made me feel like I was as good as I thought I was. And yes, it was absolutely false because I've been riding one of the great cold streaks ever since.
I think it's been good business for me that you finished that high because you keep coming back for baseball and football because of that great success.
It's true. And I have to say, like, I was at my wit's end with football. And if I hadn't have done what I know you know that I did with that cut line thing, I probably would have hung up my cleats after this season on the football. But now you've got me, just when I thought I was out, you pulled me back in.
That cut line is the best thing because you don't have to set any starting lineups hardly. There's very few free agent pickups. It's just fantastic. Plus, it's a low entry point. Not that that's a big deal for you, but it's a good format. And you almost won it all last year, man.
I know. It was so exciting. I was in Texas visiting my father the weekend of the final week of the NFL schedule, and it really did. It all came down to that last Monday night game.
Yep.
And to me, that's kind of like that's fantasy sports in a nutshell. That's why we all do it because it does. I mean, sure, the money's great. You put up some money, maybe you can win some money, but take the money off the table.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same level of excitement of like, oh my gosh, I'm competing against dudes and women from all over the country, and we all have the same goal. And it's all going to come down to this game between the Seahawks and the Cowboys. And I want to win. Like, I don't care about the money is fun, but I don't care. Actually, I want to beat these other humans. I want to beat them. You know what I mean? Like, I want that level of validation that, you know what, I'm better. I'm better at this than you guys are. And it was so close. Like, for 3/4 of the last game of the season, like, I was the cut line champion.
Yep. I know it. And it's a cool format because we had like 2,400 teams and we whittled it down to 12 teams in week 16. You were one of 12 teams competing in that final week for $100,000. And
it's why Stephen Hauschka took out a restraining order on me. And you know what? I understand it. I get it.
Well, he only missed 3 field goals that night.
He only cost me tens of thousands of dollars, Greg.
If it makes you feel any better, you weren't the only one that he cost people tens of thousands of dollars to that night.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay, let me ask you. So you compete with guys like Lindy Hinkleman and Steve Japinka and Sean Childs, and they've got more time to put into this than you do, who's doing TV shows and movies and all kinds of stuff. But it's the competition that brings you back, right? Or do you think you still have as much knowledge as those guys?
I know I don't have as much knowledge as those guys, but I love the process. I love the experience. It's a great group of guys. I got to give a shout out to Sean because in addition to being, one of the best fantasy players on the planet Earth, he's also a very accessible guy, and he's always been super cool to me. And, he was a fan of my show, and I remember one year I came in like especially unprepared, and he like slipped me his 350-page binder and was like, "Here, use this," and it was like that's really cool. Like, he didn't have to do that. So I'm a big fan of Sean, and I know you guys partnered up on a league this year. Yep. He's just a good guy, and it's a good group of dudes, and it's something I've been doing, since '99, really, wow. And I love it. It's my one true vice in life, and like I told you this year, it was like, I come here every year for the last 6 or 7 years or however long I've been doing it, and I'm up against guys that are better than me, that have more time to dedicate to the craft than I do, that have more knowledge than I do, and yet every year I basically come in with the same strategy as they do, hoping for a miracle. Yeah. And this year it was like, you know what? I'm going to change it up. I'm going to zig. I'm going to swerve. Like, I can't beat these guys at their game because they are better than me, and they do basically do it for a living. So if I'm going to finish 6th or 7th or 8th or 9th in my league this year, I want to do it like marching to the beat of my own drum. And so for the first year ever in the NFBC, I used the primetime event as sort of the opportunity to do something completely different. And I'm excited because it was the most fun I've ever had drafting. I took great pleasure in watching the looks on men's faces. And I took 3 pitchers in the first 3 rounds, and I'm really interested to see how this year plays out because I did do something different, and I really did stick to it, and we spoke about it, and I can't wait to see how it plays out.
I loved it. I love the strategy. You went with speed and pitching. And you started out with Felix Hernandez from the 12th spot. Then you went Steven Strasburg and Madison Bumgarner. Now, Strasburg hasn't pitched well yet. And I thought the start was great. I think where you would love to be right now is having Dee Gordon and Billy Hamilton on your team for the speed part, correct?
It didn't go quite the way that I had it scripted in my head. And not just with the speed guys. Like, I should have known better because the NFBC is always a lap ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? It's the prime time. It's a 12-team league. There's more pitching depth. I will get Max Scherzer at 12. I will build my team around Scherzer and go from there. And even that didn't happen. I should have known that in the NFBC, Scherzer was going to leapfrog Felix. And sure enough, he did. And so, my brilliant strategy of KDSing the 12 spot automatically put me sort of at a disadvantage because I was like, well, now I'm starting with a guy that I didn't even anticipate having.
Yeah.
And Felix is great, and I hope he stays healthy, but he's not a guy that I ever would have drafted. But when he's sitting there at 12 and your strategy is pitching and speed, you have to take him. And then, when it comes back to you and you're thinking, I'll take David Price or Chris Sale, and those guys are gone. Then you're looking at Steven Strasburg and you're like, whoa, I didn't have this guy in the coffers either. And so, you kind of go with the flow and you roll with the punches. And I feel like at the end of the day, I still have very strong pitching, and on paper, guys that, hit at the top of the lineup should score a lot of runs. And if they can get on base, will steal bags. Of course, after the first week of the season, it's a complete disaster because nobody's doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But I feel like, I have reliable enough guys that things will either regress or progress to the mean. And, come May 1st or May, 10th or something like that, we should have a better sort of grasp on what this strategy could yield, because I feel like those guys will mostly do what they're supposed to do, and then we'll see how it stacks up against the other strategies.
Yeah, no, I think your pitching is definitely going to hold up. You got Sonny Gray, you got closers Melanson, Rosenthal, Andrew Miller. You got AJ Burnett in the 23rd round. He's looked good early. So no, I think your pitching is solid. It's the stolen bases that hopefully you can get enough of them without having D. Gordon and Billy Hamilton on there. All right, let me just ask you one other thing here. So I know you do baseball and football. Like you said, in football, there were times I think you shut down production up in Calgary or Vancouver where you were and got to our NFFC drafts in time to be able to do the live ones. What do you like more, baseball or football? And secondly, do you know any other Hollywood dudes who play fantasy? I know you drafted next to Nick Cassavetes, but anybody else you know that plays fantasy?
Well, let me just say, I've been doing the NFFC and the NFBC for years, and I know Nick's work. And I'm a huge fan of that entire family. Yeah. And I've been very sort of reticent and shy to approach Nick. And this year, luck of the draw, in the main, we were sitting next to each other. Yep. And for the first time in the whole experience, I was actually able to hang out with that dude. Yep. And it was a real treat for me. I've kind of crafted, if I can even use that word, my sort of strategy in this industry after what, Nick's father sort of did as an artist, which is, he was a filmmaker who kind of used acting and for lack of a better word, sort of a commercial approach to acting, to make some money so that he could use that money to go make films that he couldn't get anybody else to pay for.
Right.
And I think Nick has followed in his father's footsteps in a lot of ways. And I have so much respect for that. And to be able to sit next to Nick and finally kind of tell him after all these years of seeing him in the draft room, but not having the courage to approach him, like, hey, man, I have a lot of respect and a lot of deference and reverence for what your family crest stands for in our industry was a really exciting thing for me. And he was so awesome, and he was so sort of sweet, and he kind of just, he kind of sat there and he kind of let me do my thing and say my piece. And it was a really cool experience. And I owe that to you and to the NFBC, because I wouldn't have had it otherwise. And like I said, I was a chicken. I had plenty of opportunities to approach him and say this in the past, but I just didn't. And this year was perfect. And we sat there and we drafted a team together and we talked a little bit about the business. And it was a really great opportunity. And I thank you for that. And,
very good.
And as far as other guys in my business that do it, there's a ton. I would say football is the one that everybody does, because it's one game a week, and it's basically a weekly league, and it requires less time, and people are busy and they have families, and they figure, hey, I'll tune into my squad on Saturday and forget about the Thursday night game, and it's something I can set up for the weekend. But as far as like the super hardcore kind of fantasy purists like Nick and I, I haven't come across a lot of them. I think it takes more than sort of like a fleeting passing interest in the industry. I think it has to be in your bones, and you had to have started doing it a long time ago. Yeah. And that's something that, Nick and I both did. Yeah. And so it kind of doesn't matter what we do for a living. It's like we could be doctors, we could be lawyers, we could be bus drivers. It wouldn't matter. Like, we would still be coming back to fantasy to sort of get that fix. Yeah.
We had Nick on earlier. He said he loves doing the NFBC and fantasy because it brings him back to the days when him and his dad used to play and get the stats out of the sporting news in the newspaper. So that was really cool.
I tell you, like, I started in high school with my buddies in the USA Today, had their little mail-in fantasy basketball league, and that's how we started.
Really?
Like, it's crazy to think back to those days, and then and then the dial-in modem days, and then everything that sort of led up to where we are now. It's been quite a journey, and I'm happy to say that I've been there for every moment of it.
I agree with you 100%. Prodigy, I remember those days and how slow they really were. All right, Drew, we got to let you ask one question before we let James go. This is your wedding present. Go for it.
This is my wedding present. Awesome. Gosh. The one I always caught on the show that got me was when you and Dule would just do that little when you guys would do that little mouth movement, you know what I'm talking about? I just want to know if that would come up.
You're talking about the lip curl.
Yes, the lip curl. Did that come naturally, or is that just something you guys developed? Because it just made me laugh every time you guys did it at each other.
The lip curl, it's 100% credit is due to Dule. That's something that he kind of developed as we sort of created these characters and found our sea legs. And then, for me, like, I'm unapologetic. I'll steal from anybody. And
and yes, we saw the show many times.
Yeah, even if it's my own co-star. The lip curl was Dule's. It became a signature for Gus, and then I just piggybacked off of that. And the last half, I'd say, of that series, like, it took almost nothing. Like an acorn could fall from a tree, and that was enough of a reason to toss a double lip curl.
All right, good stuff. Well, James Roday, it was great talking to you. I know you're playing the NFFC cut line, but you get your butt back to the Bellagio for football. We'll just fake a draft, all right?
Look, it's a highlight for me every year, man. And, I thank you for doing what you guys do. It's an unbelievable way to sort of not do drugs or things that are really bad for you and still obsess over something. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Best of luck, and I'm going to be watching this primetime team and rooting it on, all right?
You both, pal. Thanks,
all right. Thanks much. That's James Roday. He's a fantastic young actor, the star of Psych. We love him in the NFL.